Both subtypes place great value in being loved, the sexual 5 due to its sexual instinct and the social 4 due to its place in the heart triad. The sexual 5 feels their impoverishment through lack of love, but due to their fixation of stinginess, they suffer a contradiction between fear and desire. They worry that if they give too much of themselves, even if they want to, then the relationship will suffer as a result. Withdraw from eroticism, from spontaneity, from play, for fear of losing what? Pleasure. Or rather, I am afraid of not feeling anything, of being powerless or not liking it, that it is only an obligation that I do not want. It is a basic distrust in the natural abundance of love, both mine and other people. The sexual 5 does not show themselves off with a sexually attractive image, but is instead more subtle in showing his affection through intimate actions. Sexual 5s may also compulsively seduce instead of being clear and direct. This is a way to avoid rejection, as he weaves a web for people to fall into, yet struggles to commit. By maintaining multiple relationships, he allows himself to emotionally disconnect so that it makes it easy for himself to leave. The social 4's need to be loved stems from envy. Envy is transformed into false admiration. He wants to emulate what he loves and therefore seek it out. Once they believe they have obtained what they wanted, it is easier to drop their desire and move towards something new. To be loved, the social 4 needs a place within the group, to know that he is desired and wanted. Despite this, the social 4 is typically docile and doesn't seek attention because they believe that they are undeserving of it. Instead, they seek love through envy, what they see in other people, what they perceive they lack. Because the social 4 has experienced suffering from a young age, he drags this suffering into his relationships, attempting to use them as compensation for this lack of love in early childhood. Thus, love becomes something sublime, inaccessible, almost impossible to find and experience. For the social 4, being helpful and helping arises from the subject idea that love must be deserved and that it is not free. He has learned that in order to be loved, he must earn love in some way, and that is why, when something is asked of him, he spontaneously puts himself at the service of the other person. The social 4 can be characterized by strong emotionality and struggles to separate his person from his emotions. For the social 4, emotions make him feel alive, so that he can fall into these emotions even if they aren't necessarily positive. The sexual 5, however, being an E5, still attempts to separate and disconnect from their emotions and emotionality, despite being seen as more emotionally expressive than the other E5 subtypes. The social 4 has the ability to be very empathetic, putting himself in another person's place, living another's emotional experience. He empathizes in order to feel useful in the relationship, as it removes the guilt of being unable to help people in other ways. This can be more difficult for the sexual 5, despite his more emotional nature, as stinginess holds him back. The social 4 has little autonomy and, not feeling worthy to even ask for help, he laments. His request for help, never explicit, is made up of tears, sweetness, irony, and also through blaming of the other. The social 4 can become angry and disappointed when whatever he expects to happen hasn't happened. On the other hand, the sexual 5, being an E5 subtype, also feels the need to assert their autonomy, still valuing independence. These types can appear similar outwardly as both reject help, but the social 4 stems from a lack of autonomy and uncertainty about their purpose, whereas the sexual 5 feels more confident in their own autonomy to be able to assert this. The social 4's perceived autonomy comes from a need to be recognized for their competence to overcome their struggles. The miser wants the other person all to himself. He wants to live in a bubble of intimacy with his ideal partner and block out the rest. For the sexual 5, his lair is created in the form of another person, his fantasy of this idealized romance, a surrogate romance. The sexual 5 suffers in a contradiction between their greed and seeking a relationship that the sexual subtype is focused on. He wants his partner to not demand or interfere with his need for solitude. They want to love and be loved without the emotional draining. Because of this, the sexual 5s are more caught in the fantasy of an ideal partner, their stinginess preventing them from forming relationships they see as meaningless or superficial. Due to their stinginess and fear of others, the sexual 5 believes that their ideal partner will be able to give them everything they lack, fill them up, and save them. Of course, we are left alone, because we do not lower ourselves to the earthly and imperfect lives of others, nor to relationships that we consider superficial. It would be a waste of time and energy. Because the sexual 5 has an idealized version of romance, they can struggle to let those within their life leave once they are in it. The fantasy leads them to finding it extremely difficult to enter and leave a relationship. On the other hand, the social 4 has a constant need for emotional contact as a desire to fill the inherent void of the E4. For the social 4, love is about the love received from others rather than the love he can give. They need to be recognized to feel worth and love, which means that their identity is heavily based on what other people think of them. The external world for the social 4 is just seen as a way to fill the void through seeking out a sense of personal worth. They need to fill the empty hole within them to be satisfied. The passion for stinginess is still extremely prominent in the sexual 5. The greed for the 5 removes all positive experience from a person's life. It tyrannically restricts everything that could be translated as life, abundance, or spiritual peace. The sexual 5 renounces this love and abundance, living still in the safety of their isolation. The miser not only retains what little he has, but structures himself to sabotage any possibility of abundance and gratuity in life. By doing this, the sexual 5 manages to minimize their own freedom and personal expression due to fear of being consumed. It is a slow and painful agony. I lose myself in front of the other. I withdraw from my internal axis. I find myself facing external demands that exhaust me. I feel the need to isolate myself and recharge my batteries. It is my need for solitude. The social 4 does not allow themselves pleasure, as he has grown up believing that pleasure will be punished or paid for later. Where the sexual 5 sees pleasure as a potential threat to themselves and what they have, the social 4 sees pleasure and enjoyment as something they must pay for. Pleasure for the social 4 is only temporary, it isn't real, and it will not last. On top of this, suffering for the E4 can feel like pleasure. They trap themselves in a cycle of the belief that if they are suffering, they will receive what they need, but if they don't suffer, they will not receive anything. I feel my predisposition to isolate myself, to not be in a group, especially in moments of celebration, of lightness. Punctually, fear prevails in me when I should be enjoying with others. All of this within a feeling of self-exclusion, of not measuring up, of basically giving up on meeting my true needs. The sexual 5 clings onto the past, which keeps them stagnant in their own life. The sexual 5 is trapped in the memory of enlightened times that no longer exist. He wishes for these memories that can no longer come again, which feeds his idealizations. The sexual 5's desire for external freedom is a reflection of the fact that they lack internal freedom. They cannot be satisfied, which is transformed into opposite features such as rigidity, similar to that of the Enneagram 1. For sexual 5, completion means letting go and being open to new experiences. However, stinginess prevents the E5 from letting go, perfectionism making him believe that he is never ready. Like other E5s, the sexual 5 has an inherent fear of the other. They can be characterized by imminent impoverishment, meaning that they can withhold and avoid giving themselves to others. Because of the sexual 5's internal conflict between contact and withdrawal, it forms the counterpart of the E5, fighting between emotionality and rigidity. Sexual 5s are less socially isolated compared to the other two E5 types, yet they still fear attracting attention or being the center of discussion. He aspires to be unusual and different, yet not to the point that people turn and look at him. The E5 is identified by restraint and greed due to fear that letting go means catastrophic emptying. In the sexual E5, the fear of letting go has to do precisely with the erotic drive, which he keeps inside and reserves for a better occasion, as if it was something to accumulate. This means that the sexual 5 suffers from connecting with others, as he sees encounters as being less rewarding than imagined. He clings to himself as compensation, resigning himself to a pseudo-gratifying life with the bare minimum. Envy translates into self-hatred, making him feel inadequate to exist within a group that he belongs in or wishes to belong in. The social 4 internalizes their outside or perceived environment, comparing themselves to those around them. This is different to the sexual 5, who is less concerned about belonging as part of a group, as their fear comes from feeling exposed or drained by others. The social 4 can be extremely hard on themselves because of this, trapping themselves in a cycle of focusing on what they lack rather than what they have. In childhood, the E4 believes that they need to save the people around them. By saving others, he wishes to save himself. They do this to satisfy their hunger for the mother, and due to its impossibility, leads the social 4's anger towards its own mother. Because he needs and depends on her, he swallows this anger inside. Since I can't have you, I'll become you, so that I can be you and also hate you. Due to their internalization of their lack, anger turns to envy, a need to be what they lack. However, they can still struggle with throwing themselves into life due to a fear of the world and judgment of others. You like to be social and need others, but you tend to hide and find it difficult to expose yourself, especially in a new and wide social context. Guilt for the E5 stems from their stinginess. Because isolation for the E5 is a defensive response, they see this behaviour as an act of aggression on their own part. Perhaps my most frequent feeling of guilt is about not having energy. I blame myself for it, and that takes away my energy to act. It is a vicious circle. I realise that guilt is a way of maintaining the feeling of victimization, of keeping myself small. Guilt for the social 4 comes from a feeling of uselessness. They believe that they are worth nothing, so therefore their worth comes from other people's expectations. They are worried about the external gaze of other people. They feel guilty as they believe that they can never be enough. This lack of perpetual pursuit of goals that immediately lost their meaning the moment they were achieved has also been the engine of my life to achieve things. I have always felt that it's never enough. I pursued, I achieved many things. I never felt competent enough in my profession for years, and I looked outside for that security that I couldn't find myself. This guilt comes from childhood, where he learns that his mistakes can hurt others. He internalizes this into believing that he himself is the mistake. The social 4 and the sexual 5 both have a strong fear of the unstable, unreliable, and dangerous environment that surrounds them. This stems from childhood, which means he doesn't know how to move in the world. He has the feeling that everything is bigger than him and it surpasses him, and he doesn't see a way out. He feels defenseless, as if he had no skin. In the social 4, Masochism is the most manifested. They suffer between the paradox to harm themselves through destructive action as a way to feel less emotional pain. Sometimes they look to seek pleasure rather than feel in contact with themselves, a way to avoid existing. This self-destructive behaviour turns into a cry for help from the social 4. He feels that the world does not understand him or see his talents, so he has to be recognised in other ways. Opening up and facing his own shame and feelings of unworthiness can actually be therapeutic for the social 4, helping him to accept his shame and overcome it through feeling the pain. The sexual 5 also finds themselves isolating from others. However, for the sexual 5, this is a defense and safety mechanism rather than a masochistic ideal. The social 4 feels trapped in feelings of sadness and melancholy. It's like an addiction. The social 4 is characterized by his shame, his immense feelings of unworthiness, or that he does not belong. Behind this shame, he feels a need for superiority. Due to the E4 passion for envy, he needs to be recognized. He wants to be taken care of, embraced, approved, and protected. Shame for the social 4 stems from a guilt of not being perfect, not living up to the standards that he sees others achieve, and therefore he feels inferior. He believes that his worth stems from this, thinking that if he has nothing to provide others, he cannot receive love. The social 4 is externally focused in the sense that they need to be liked by everyone, meaning that he loses his sense of self through appeasing others. Self-identification is important to the E4, seeking out what they have been missing all along. E5s are hypersensitive characters. Hiding behind a facade of nonchalance, they disconnect from their feelings. Unlike the social 4, who seems to feed off shame and negative emotions, the sexual 5 attempts to reject and disconnect from them. Alongside the disconnection of feeling, there is an idea that to explode, to lose oneself, or perhaps even to die. The social 4 seeks attention through complaints, typically of small or trivial things. He can be impatient, continually focusing on himself and what he lacks. Through complaint, he can confirm that the people around him see him and care for him. His complaints keep the other person present and available within the relationship. However, when it comes to deeper issues, the social 4 will withdraw and isolate himself, believing that no one will truly care or understand. The emptiness and anguish that he feels are indescribable. He doesn't feel like he can trust anyone. He distrusts others and life so much that he thinks that no one can really help him in the face of so much pain. It is as if he were desperate, exhausted. The E4 doesn't know how to be alone with themselves and the emptiness, so when they withdraw, they cannot handle the inner emptiness that they themselves once chose. The sexual 5, on the other hand, being an E5, doesn't outwardly complain as often, fearing that they will be perceived wrongly for speaking out about their own issues. They also see sharing things that hurt or upset them as personal knowledge, which frightens them as they feel exposed.